the dog that killed the whole town. The first one to die was Henry Wallace. They found him in his kitchen, his insides hollowed out, his face frozen in a scream that had never finished leaving his lips. His eyes, God, his eyes, were wide open, staring at something no one else could see. His dog, a shaggy black mutt named Duke, sat beside the body, licking its blood-soaked paws. Nobody knew what to make of it. At first, they blamed a wild animal, maybe a bear. But there was no sign of a break-in, no struggle, no evidence of anything, except the dog. That's when people started whispering. And that's when people started dying. The first night. A storm rolled over the town that night, a thick, unnatural fog seeping through the streets, muffling the sound of the rain. The air smelled different, like wet fur and rotting meat. Sheriff Daniels was the next. His wife heard the back door creak open around midnight. She thought it was the wind or maybe the sheriff checking the yard. But when she turned over in bed, she saw it. A shadow sitting at the foot of the bed. Not a person. Not an animal. Something else. It was low to the ground, its shape barely distinguishable in the darkness. But there were eyes, yellow, glowing like lanterns in the night. They didn't blink. They just stared. She couldn't move. Couldn't scream. Couldn't breathe. And then the thing moved. A slow, deliberate shift in the shadows, like the stretching of a body that wasn't quite human. She heard a wet, gurgling growl, felt the mattress sink under something impossibly heavy. Then the room went black. By sunrise, the sheriff was dead. His body was found just outside his house, his throat torn open, his chest caved in as though something had crushed him from the inside. His ribs jutted out like jagged, broken teeth. His heart was gone. The only thing left beside the corpse was a single muddy paw print. A dog's print. And yet, no one ever saw Duke leave Henry Wallace's house. The infection spreads. By the end of the week, the town was in chaos. People started hearing things at night, scratching at their doors, low growls from darkened corners, the sound of paws clicking across their wooden floors when no dog was inside. Mrs. Holloway swore she saw Duke watching her from the tree-line near the school. His head tilted at an unnatural angle, his mouth open just a little too wide, his tongue blackened as if it had been burned. 2 nights later, she was found in her bathtub, her skin peeled away in ribbons, her body arranged in a way that no human could have done alone. By then, the town knew. It wasn't Duke. Not anymore. Something was inside of him. Something old. Something hungry. The curse. No one knew where Duke had come from. Henry had found him wandering along Route 89, standing in the middle of the road, staring. His fur was wet with something dark, and his eyes weren't right. Henry took him home. Fed him. Gave him a bed. The first night, the neighbors heard something strange. Howling. Not like a dog. Like a man screaming through clenched teeth. No one talked about it the next day. And then the killings began. The unraveling. By the second week, half the town was gone. Some fled. Some locked their doors, hoping the thing wouldn't find them. Some didn't get a choice. They tried to kill the dog. They shot it. Stabbed it. Ran it over. But every time someone swore they had put it down, it came back. The next night, they'd hear the familiar clicking of claws on pavement. The deep, guttural breathing outside their windows. The last thing they'd ever hear. Because Duke wasn't a dog anymore. It was something else wearing the shape of a dog. The final night. By the end of the month, the town was silent. Houses stood empty. Lights left on. Doors still open. The wind carried the stink of blood, of rot, of something far worse. The last survivor was Samuel Porter, the town's gravedigger. He had seen what Duke really was. He had seen it change. It had started with the eyes. The glow stretched beyond the sockets as if something inside the dog was trying to push through. The bones beneath the fur cracked, lengthened, shifted. The mouth split open wider than any dog's should. And then it stood up. On 2 legs. It spoke, but not with a voice. Not with sound. It spoke inside his head. It showed him things, horrible things. What it really looked like before it found a body. What it was before it had a name. It had been here long before the town. Before people. Before light. Samuel ran. He ran into the woods, the smell of iron thick in the air, the sound of wet breathing behind him. But no matter how far he went, he could still hear it. The clicking. The low, bubbling growl. The thing pretending to be a dog. He made it to the river. Collapsed onto his knees. Behind him, the trees rustled, the wind whispered his name, and then, nothing. No sound. No movement. Nothing but the feeling that something was watching him from the dark. The end that never ends. Days passed. Weeks. No one came looking. No one spoke of the town that had disappeared overnight. It was erased. forgotten. And yet, sometimes, late at night, if you drive down the abandoned roads, if you listen closely to the wind, you might hear it. The click of claws on pavement. A deep, wet growl. A pair of yellow eyes watching from the trees. And if you see it, if you see Duke staring at you from the shadows, run. Because no one ever gets away. No one. Final warning. If you are still listening, if you have made it to the end of this story, it knows you now. It knows your scent. It knows your voice. And tonight, when you turn off the lights, it will be waiting. Do you dare to sleep? A ghost face screaming in fear.